Hello everybody, welcome to today's webinar. As usual, I'm going to be your host and taking you through today's topic, which is all things to do with properties. So Cuelist properties, group properties, and then on the end onto user preferences. As always, any questions, feel free to pop those in the chat. Ben's with me and he'll be able to shout out or answer any questions you have directly. I'll just wait a couple more seconds for the last guys to make it in. Although they appear to be stuck, so we'll get straight to it. So Cuelist properties, they can be found in a number of places. You can right-click a virtual LCD in the virtual console view. For example, if I just change my page over here, you can right-click and come into Cuelist properties, and that will open up this window here. It can also be accessed from any component. So that was Cuelist number 8. So to do the same thing, you could right click here and click properties. The same properties window will open, and this can be accessed anytime you see this in a component. So if you right click from here, you could access that. And you can also get to it from the command line. The command line shortcut in R2 is Alt and full stop. So you can just quickly type that combination, bring up these properties. So in today's webinar, we're pretty much going to start from the top and just explain what all of these options do when you turn them on and off, and talk about the options that are there. So if I just jump back to my virtual console view, I've got a couple of Cuelist pre-programmed for this demonstration. List 7 is just a stage wash, so we go from magenta and cyan to blue and yellow, and then red and white just here. If I just release this Cuelist and show you a secondary list, which is list 8, in this Cuelist I just have these 4 fixtures on my singer in white, just like this. So what happens when we're playing back the Cuelist normally is the console works on an LTP basis, so the last action takes precedence. So what that means is if we press play on the singer Cuelist, the last action is to light up this singer in white. So that's what we see there. So that's great. But this continues back in the other direction too. So if I press play on Q2, this is the last action, which also includes these 2 spots on this truss here as well. So if we play this, that's the last action. So therefore these lights return to become yellow and being told to do whatever this cue is telling them to do. Sometimes that's not what you want, because this singer might be the person paying the bill today, and we need to make sure that he's staying lit all of the time. So we can use priorities to deal with that. And that's actually the first option within the Cuelist properties. We have priority at the top. By default, all Cuelists that you create will have a normal priority. We can increase that, so we can go up a level to high or programmer. I'll come back to programmer in a minute. So if this Cuelist is high, this means that this is taking priority over anything else over lower priority, which in this case is list 7. So now if we play list 7, all these actions are changing, but because this Cuelist is a higher priority, this stays exactly as this list is until we release that Cuelist. When we release this Cuelist, of course, the fixtures will then return to be doing what they should be doing at the underneath level, which is yellow in this case. The fixture chooser view, this live tab is Vista's programmer, and this is actually one of the highest levels of priority in the console. So anything that you change here, such as make these fixtures go, let's go, I don't know, purple and up in the air, this is programmer priority. So again, it doesn't matter what I'm changing underneath. I could be playing these cues here and even the singer cue list. The fixture chooser, the programmer, this live tab, has priority. I'll change the color just to make it more obvious. Let's make it green. Over everything else that's running underneath If I clear my programmer, of course, then it returns to doing what it should be doing underneath, which is this date in this example. Let me just press Control Z. And when you're in the Cuelist properties, that's what the programmer priority means. This means that this Cuelist is then on an equal level with the fixture chooser live tab programmer. So if we go and change this position to say up in the air again, this is now working on an L2 basis on this. So that was the last action, so it's gone green up in the air. If I press play and reassert this Q again, this is then the last action, so it will come back down. So these two just can then work on an equal level on an LTP basis, so you can move stuff around once again. So for that reason, you may want to, if you're creating sort of like color or strobe bump Cuelist, you might want to assign those to become programmer priority. Certainly if you're working live in a sort of busking environment, because you always want to make sure that that's going to play on top of whatever else you might have running in the console. So that's pretty much it for priority. Are there any questions on priority in the chat, Ben?
No questions on that.
Cool. So moving on to the next one, if I just release my Cuelist again, we'll just work with these 3 queues. The default action of a Cuelist is to basically repeat and loop around. So this is the end queue, Q3. If I press play another time, it actually restarts and goes back to queue number 1. This is a Cuelist property as well. Play end option. The default's restart. Other options available are release. So what will happen here is the Cuelist will release on my last press. So I press it again, the Cuelist releases and turns itself off, and then starts from the beginning again. The last option there is called ignore. So what will happen here is we'll get to the end of the Cuelist, and it doesn't matter how many times you're then pressing this play button, it's not going to change or do anything. To release this Cuelist, you would have to manually release it yourself and then restart from there. I'm just going to change that property back to restart. Okay. Next one. Ignore release all. That's to do with this command up here, release all Cuelist, but this would also be applicable to the inserted command release all except. The release all except is still classed as a release all command. So when this is turned on, if this Cuelist is playing, when you press the release all button, it's not automatically turning this Cuelist off. You could have other queues playing, and these queues, it's only the queues without that setting turned on that will be turned off when using that release all command. So useful if you need to make sure that you need to keep fixtures lit at all times when you're playing back your show. So that's release all on or off. I'm going to turn that back to off, which is the default. All the settings that I'm showing you, by the way, are the default settings. Ignore snapshots. Let me just see if I can demonstrate this for you. I still have that setting turned on. Ignore release. Let's turn that back off. Okay, so currently I have a snapshot here. This snapshot is playing back these cues, so my blue power cans and profiles and stage risers on top. If I play this cue list here, this snapshot was recalling these cue lists. So basically, list 7 wasn't included in that snapshot. So what happens when we recall this snapshot is that this snapshot will turn off any cues that weren't a part of that snapshot when I recorded it. So therefore, it's turned this cue list off automatically when I triggered that. Whereas what ignore snapshots will do, if this is on, it does what it says in the tin. It basically, it won't turn it off automatically. So if we've got this cue list on now, when we play this snapshot, it won't automatically turn that off. It keeps this active. An example of this could be you might be working in a marquee and you might have some bar lights or corporate logos around the venue, and you don't want that to be automatically turned off when you're triggering your snapshots for other stage looks, for example. I'm also going to reset that. Release in black. See if I can demonstrate this on a different cue list. Let's take a look at my flyout cue list here. Oops, I don't think I recorded intensity in this. Cool. So what happens here when we release this cue list is all features are released at the same time. So intensity of position in this example. So what we see is we see this decay downwards when we release it because position and intensity are releasing at the same time. So you're seeing your stage change. You'd also see color changes back to the default, which is typically white if they had color in there as well. Let me just program some color in so we can see that as well. So you'll see it move down and change to white and fade out all at once. What release in black does, if we turn this setting on, is when we release the cue list, what happens is the fixtures will release to 0%, and then once they've hit 0%, they'll then release all of the features. So this typically makes the stage look much better. It fades out nicely in place, and then once it hits 0, it turns off. So that's a Cuelist property, so that's a good one. HTP enabled, this stands for highest takes priority, and this setting is only to do with intensity. It's not to do with anything else. This is just an intensity property only. And I have a little example of this as well, which is on these two cues just here. So in list 9, let me just go and show you what's going on these fixtures here. So in list 9, in Q1, I've got the profiles at 50%, and in Q2, they go off to 0%. So that's cool. If I now play list 5 Q1, list 5 Q1 has these profiles at 100% just here. So just like I explained at the beginning on an LTP basis, if we now trigger list 9 again, the last action is these profiles returning to 0%. So that's the last action. So therefore, we see those fade out. If I go to list 5 and open up the properties of list 5 and we turn HTTP on, what that tells the console is that, hey, this is higher. This is a higher value than the last action there. So therefore, it's staying on. It doesn't matter what you're pressing on an LT basis or intensity on other cue lists. If this is playing, the higher value is going to be output to stage. Any questions on that little bit?
Yeah, there are a couple questions. Is it possible to use release in black for the programmer? And do you tend to use release in black over manually putting move in black cues at the end of the list?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. You can't get intensity to clear out in the programmer. There's no release in black for the programmer setting. And yeah, pretty much release in black. Yeah, exactly. You can pretty much program it to do that. Typically, I find myself using this in sort of corporate situations or demonstration situations. It's just a nice way of releasing Cuelist and not having lights go back. And typically, I have this setting on most of my Cuelist because I'm quite happy knowing that they're just going to sit there and the console's going to handle it. It's a good feature, and typically I put this on most of my lists just because it saves me having to do all of that stuff manually.
Yeah, to put it this way, Stephen, you could do it manually, but it would require a lot more steps and a lot more programming to do when a simple setting here does it for you.
Are we good to carry on? Did that answer the question?
Yep, that's good.
Fader type, this is to do what the intensity is doing. So again here, I'm just going to turn on autoplay and release. I'll come back to this setting in a minute, which basically means that it plays the cue. So what's happening here is when I push this fader up, it's only the intensity that the fader's controlling, which is the default. If you change this to become all features, this is how you would get non-intensity parameters to be controlled on the fader. So all features in the cue are now moving with that fader, as you can see that. So an example here could be that we could have our nice stage wash, and when I want to do that fly out to the audience, I just push this fader up, and when I'm done with it, I bring it down and it will come back down to whatever it was meant to be doing before. One tip when doing this though, is you probably want, if you do want to do the example that I've just shown you, is it's probably a good idea to make the cue time 0 seconds, and also in the timing tab, which I'll come back to at the end, is you can adjust the release timing. There's a default of 2 seconds by default, but you can change that. So if I show you this example again now, it's got a much better control of that. The reason it's fading in and out is because I programmed intensity in this cue list. Typically, you wouldn't have intensity in that look, so I'm just doing position and color for the flyout. So now there you go. You're just seeing it fly up. When you pull it down, it comes down. It's almost like a crossfade, but it's not. It's like a mode 2 fader on other consoles, if you're familiar with those. So what do we have next? Okay, so fader autoplay. This is to do with what the cue list is doing when you're pushing the fader up. So with NOM, what's happening? I'll just do this on number 7. So with non, you're adjusting the intensity level, but the cue is not automatically playing or releasing. So to play the cue, I have to manually hit play, like this. Autoplay, what happens here is when the fader moves from 0 to 1%, it plays the cue list, which means I can pull the intensity back, and it doesn't release. So I can push it up, and this look, intensity comes to stage again. I can progress to the blue and yellow look, pull this down. I'm just removing the intensity. I'm not releasing it or anything else. It's intensity only, and then comes back to here. If I push it up, pull it down, you get the idea. If we change that to autoplay and release, what happens is when the fader gets to 0%, it releases the cue list. If you just watch the green play here, when we get to 0, it releases the cue list, which then resets back to the first cue, and we push it up and we're playing the first cue again. And we demoed the rest, so you might as well look at the others as well. With auto release, when you push the fader up, nothing happens. You have to press play yourself. But when the fader hits 0%, it will auto release that cue list that you're pulling down. I should mention at this time that store all, when you're using the store all setting, that's actually setting some properties for you. It turns HDP on. It sets the fader type to become auto play and release, and it also changes the fader intensity mode to become submaster, which I'll explain in a minute. By default, all other store operations, so store part and creating a cue list directly by the new button, use the default cue list property setting, which is auto play and release set to none, HDP off, and fader intensity time normal, which is the software default. Fader intensity time. So this is just to do with intensity timings only. And I'll try and make a new cue list just to demonstrate this. So let's just put the lights, I'll put them up in the air just so we can hopefully see something. And we'll make this be 10 seconds. and I'm going to turn the Cuelist property to become autoplay and release, and I'll show you fader intensity time normal to begin with. So I'm going to push this fader up in like half a second or a second, quick. Something much quicker than 10 seconds. So if I push these up quick, let me just make sure I had that setting right. Yep. You can see the lights are fading up in their program time, which is 10 seconds. So that's what normal means. It doesn't matter how quick you push up this fader, the lights are going to fade up in the Q time that you program, which is 10 seconds. So I'll just do that again. I'll push it up. You can see that the lights are fading up in the Q time. Whereas if we change the Cuelist property to become fader intensity mode submaster, what this means is that the intensity up time is going to take the time it takes me to push up the fader. So if I do it now in 1 second, or however quick it was, the lights get there as quick as I move that fader up. But all other features, non-intensity, are still transitioning in the Q time, which was 10 seconds in that example. In the next release of software, we have actually changed the name of that setting to be a little more user-friendly. In the next version, this is actually called program time or manual. So program time takes the place of normal, and manual takes the place of submaster. Did that make sense?
Looks like it. No questions right now.
Cool. So the next one, I usually find this hard to demonstrate, but I'll just explain what it does. Release on override. This is to do with two different Cuelists or a number of different Cuelists that use the same fixtures in them. And if the setting's on, it means that if a Cuelist is no longer contributing to the stage state in any way, like all channels are being overridden on an LTP basis, so that Cuelist doesn't technically need to be active for the stage lock. If release and override is on, it will automatically release itself when it gets to that state. If there's a single DMX channel from that Cuelist that is contributing to the stage state in any way, then it won't automatically release itself. So that's what that setting does. Me personally, as a programmer, I don't use this setting at all because I'm quite happy knowing that I'm layering up different Cuelists on top of each other. I could be completely happy knowing that all features are overridden, but when I press release of a top level Cuelist, I want that Cuelist to go back to what was playing underneath. Whereas if you've turned on release and override, then potentially there's nothing there to go back to, so your lights start going off. But anyway, that's what that setting does. Auto moving black, I'm not going to go into too much detail on this because we have talked about this in the Moving Black webinar that is on our YouTube channel, but I'll just show you another example of this. So let's create a new Cuelist and we'll turn on automatic moving black. Let's just take a look. Automatic moving black, it's on. So what this does, if I just program a quick Cuelist, let's go red for a change. So now if I just start programming Qs, let's go to Q number 2. Let's put him on my, let's go for the band preset. Cool, so I'm gonna copy this, I'm gonna insert a new Q and then go to these fixtures and then we'll go to these ones. Because of the automatic moving black feature, you can see it's marking every Q just in case. So if we play back this Q, we play Q number 1, the fixtures get themselves into position. So then when we play Q number 2, they're already in position. And now when we play Q3, these are already in position, and these, and so on. So this just marks every single Q just in case for you. It can save you time, as I've just demonstrated. If you know you're doing like a fractal linear-based cue list, you can just program, and the console will always put the movement into the queue before, in the queue before's time. So that's all I really need to demonstrate for this, I believe. So what's next? Auto run and show load does what it says on the tin, really. It automatically plays this queue list in the first queue when you load the show file. So when you open the show, it's going to turn this queue on. This could be house lights or stage look or something else. It's completely up to you how you want to work with that. Exclude from store, on or off. This is like a top level setting. So I've just turned that option on. So even if I'm doing a different stage look now, let's turn on the blinders, let's say, and we'll bring in some other look. Even if I'm using store all and storing this to other places, when I play back this cue list, it's not captured what was currently playing back on this list. So it's like a higher level exclude. Might be useful for maybe a smoke machine or hazer cue list or house lights. It's completely up to you, but that's what it does. It's simply not recorded in any way. You'd have to reprogram that in the programmer. It's not going to capture that. Do we have any questions there?
No, I think everybody's still with us right now.
Cool. So I'm going to come back to the timing tab. Remind me, because I might forget. But another thing that was new in Vista 3 actually is groups also have properties. So we can bring up these group faders, just bringing up intensity for this group member. So I've got my spots, washers, beams, and then some other fixtures over here. So the properties, you get to them just like you can with Cuelist. Go to properties. Let me just select the right group. And there's only 3 settings available here, and this is the application default. Ignore release all is actually set to on by default. So what that means is if you pushed up a group fader, could be here, if you press release all, doesn't turn this group off, and there's nothing to clear because there's nothing in your programmer. So potentially, if you don't know where this group is, you could be on different pages and all over the place. And if you're not aware where that group level is, you could be stuck in a state where these fixtures are on because they're all the way over here on this intensity fader, just like this. So for that reason, a personal preference that I like to use is to turn ignore release all off. So therefore, if you're setting group levels or stage look levels with faders, and then at some later point in time you want to turn those off, I'm happy in the knowledge that I can press release all and my group faders will fade out just the same as they do with Cuelist. So that's the first setting. The second setting is ignore snapshots. And again, this is on by default. So we'll do the same example. Let's go and trigger that snapshot that I had before. So let's push the spots up. We trigger the blue snapshot, and this is ignoring the snapshot. So therefore, this group level stays up. Just the same as the Cuelist property, if we turn ignore snapshots off, now when we trigger the snapshot, it will be removing this group, turning it off when you trigger the snapshot. And lastly, just like I demonstrated with the Cuelist property, we have an exclude from store option. So if this faders up, doesn't matter how you're storing cues, it's not going to be recorded into the queue content, just the same as I've just demonstrated before. Now, one thing that you can do with group properties, you can't do this with Cuelist properties, is you can actually select multiple groups together right click and click properties, and you would be changing all properties of all groups at the same time. So that's a useful tip that I can give you for that. But for now, we'll just reset this back to some settings I liked from before. Any questions on that, Ben?
Nope, no questions on that.
So if you do have some settings that you do like to use for all new Cunis that you create, you can press save as default. So this will be saving as your show default, which all new Cunis that you create will use these settings. It doesn't adjust any previously set and existing properties, but it would be the default for new lists. This is resetting to your default. So this is resetting to the same user default as saved here, or you can reset back to our factory default, which of course you can't edit. So if you move on to the timing tab, this is where you can adjust the release timing as I demonstrated earlier. So you can change that. The default is 2 seconds. Some other settings here are playback rate. I've never personally used this too much, but you can adjust the rate at which the Cuelist plays back in time. So if you increase the rate to 200%, it plays back twice as fast as you programmed it, and so on and so forth. Do watch out though if it's down at 0%. If we even let you do it, we do. It won't play back. It's like paused at that point. Time code, I'm not going to go into this in this webinar because we did again do that in last week's webinar in detail on how to work with time code, but there's some settings for enabling or arming Cuelists from here as well. Default queue follow mode. It's actually a bug in this version where you can't select this, but it is fixed in the next version. It lets you define the default queue follow mode, which is halt by default. But if you had changed that to follow or something else, every queue that you make would be automatically using this setting just here. Trace controls, I'm not sure if we've talked about this in any of our webinars actually, so we'll take a look at it. Let me just program a queue list as an example of this. Let's take a look at this. So we'll turn these blue lights on, then we'll add a new queue, we'll turn these off, add these on, turn those off, and add these on from here. So this is just my Parkan queue list. Simply blue, red, and amber. So with the chase controls, are you turning this queue list into a chase? Is it on or off? So if we turn it on, it will start to chase around in a direction. We have forwards, backwards. So 3, 2, 1. We have bounce, which will be 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3. And random, that's just a randomly defined order. Crossfade controls. So currently it's fading in at 100%. So you're seeing the transition. Whereas if I change the crossfade to 0%, you would see it snap. Just increase that a little bit. So you're not seeing that crossfade. And of course you can change the BPM, so the speed of it. So it is per minute, so 2 seconds, 2 flashes per second here at 120 beats per minute. So that's there. There is actually easier ways of setting this, certainly if you're working on a console. So if I can demonstrate how we would do that on a console, is you can actually hold down the select key. And when you hold down the select key, if you're working with a console that has a super playback section, which would be all consoles apart from an MB or a M1, you'll see the super playback change. And when doing this, you can see that you also have the chase controls here. So you click chase. I'm going to have to do it a long way because I can't hold down 2 things at once. But you would see this, so you'd be able to click chase and then click a direction, forward, reverse, bounce, so forwards, And you could also tap sync this. So this is a sync chase. So you can tap the tempo. And it would then be a chase. If you press the direction again, you would turn off the chase function. So if you press forwards, it then stops and your cue list becomes a normal cue list. These chase controls can also be found in the cue list button action down here, such as chase toggle, chase on or off. So you can turn the chase on or turn it off. But the settings that these buttons are changing are exactly the same as the ones found in the cue list properties. I think that pretty much sums it up for the property control. We did talk about MIDI and audio in our previous webinars, which we get on YouTube as well. Do we have any questions there, Ben?
There was a question about chase controls applying to portions of a cue list. So I think that would lead into cue properties themselves if you wanted to repeat cues. So the chase control applies the entire cue list. That one doesn't do anything.
Are you talking about cue controls?
Yes. Being able to loop cues, I think is where we're going with that.
Well prompted. I actually forgot to talk about cue properties, so let's talk about those. So we talked about cue list properties. There are cue properties as well, and you can get to those within the open edit here. So if I right click a cue tile, let's just add in some more. Let's just add in just some more cues just for. Okay, so here we can get to cue properties, top option. Properties of the cue, of course, the name. So we can give this an amber name. It's cue ID number 3. This is to do with the default timing of the cue list. By default, it's 2 seconds. You could change that from here. For example, if I do 0 seconds, I'm just going to come down to the defaults here and say this is my show default because I want all new cue lists created to use 0 seconds here. So if I do this, every new cue that I now create is not 2 seconds by default, but it's 0 seconds. So this can be a useful tip if you always know that you want your cues to be a certain time. You can set that in the cue properties and then save that as a default. Pop that back. So what we were talking about just there is loop. It's not a chase function. It's not going to loop around automatically. The cue transition is still going to be triggered by your play button. So let's go to, say, this cue 4. With the cue property and the loop control is you can tell it to loop back to a certain cue number. So if we go back to cue number 2, for example, this would loop back to the red luck, and we can tell it how many times to do that. We could be infinite, or we could set a number of cycles. So let's just go for 3 as an example. Play the cue list. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, back to 2, then forward to 4 again, and then back to 2, and so on. And then it would continue past once you've got to the end of that loop. So that's the only way I could do that. Would a chase do that automatically, Ben? I'm not sure. I don't use loop too often myself. Let's find out. Let's see.
Would a chase also respect a loop?
No.
Yeah.
Which is what I would expect, to be honest, but now we know.
I mean, there was a question about what's the benefit of a chase versus an effect, and my response is a chase is kind of crude and simple. So if you want a quick dimmer chase, it's a great way of doing it. But if you want something you want to use again and again, then an effect might be the way to do it too. So.
Yeah, I mean, the only time I'd use a chase, effects are far more superior for most things, given that you can change the spread of it and the fan of it and all that type of stuff and link it to effects masters as well. But what would be good for a chase is when the same fixtures are used from one step to the next. For instance, if I want these to be sort of step 1. And then in step number 2, I want to use these fixtures. And then say in the next step, I just want it to be just these. So it would be going from this type of look. You wouldn't be able to do that in effect because the same fixtures in this first example are also used in this look. And then again, in the next example, these are used on the next step. You wouldn't be able to do that in the effects engine because there's some overlap in the fixtures that are used from one step to the next. So this would be an example of where I would use a chase because then I can define exactly how I need it to be. Does that make any sense?
I think so. That's a great example. Don't think there are any other questions on that right now.
Cool. So we're getting through it. So with that, I don't think I've got any more sort of application properties to talk about. But of course, we can move on to talk about the user preferences of file. User preferences, I'm not sure how much demonstration I'm going to be able to do here, but I'm just going to go through the tabs and explain what they do. So the first tab, the general tab, auto load show. What this means is as soon as the application starts, it's going to load a specific show file, and you just browse for that and click on the show that you want from your normal settings. So upon starting the Vista application, load this show file. Could be useful if you're using Vista in sort of architectural installations, or maybe you might have a master show file that you want to put in there. So if you're working with, you know, some technical crew, they just start Vista and you're safe in the knowledge that they're always going to be loaded back into the default master show file. They're not going to be on some messed up version. So that's pretty good. Auto generate fixture type groups. Let's just make a new show file. Simply to do with this. So if I patch some fixtures, Vista will auto generate fixture type groups for me down here, the auto groups. If that option is turned off, when I patch fixtures, it won't make a group automatically of these types. I would have to manually create the group like this. Again, it's personal preference. Personally, I like this off when I'm programming, but my preference. Preview parked fixtures. This is to do with if you're parking features or fixtures. Let's just show you that on to begin with. So let's just park these fixtures here. So right click, park fixtures. If we're clearing this, you can see that, is it on? Should I turn it on? Okay, you did see it change there actually. Let me just come back to that. But they only not park color. Let me see.
I haven't been following.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. Jack, make sure you know what you're doing before you demonstrate it. So we're going to park position and color. So we parked it green. So the setting's off currently. I can see it's parked because it's red. So I know this fixture's parked. The question is, why can't I see that in WYSIWYG for a second? Tell you what. Let me open my show file where it's actually connected to WYSIWYG, and that would be beneficial. Let's do that again. Cool. So we're going to go reds on my singer, and I'm going to park these fixtures just here. So we park them. There we go. So I know these are parked because it's red. And the option in the user preferences, when we have preview parked fixtures on, this will visually show me in the icon that these are on in red. So that's simply what it means, preview the parked fixtures. We can still program sort of around them. So if I'm programming this, the visual fixture choosers always show you what's actually parked. Whereas if it's off, then it will just show you what your programming is sort of blind. There, phew, wasn't that hard to demonstrate in the first place. That's just me. Did that make sense for anybody?
I believe so. There's one question that I don't quite understand in the timeline. Have to explain that a little bit more on that. Are the parked, if I'm reading this right, are the parked fixtures showing up in the timeline?
No.
There you go.
So I'm just going to create a preset here, and this preset is going to be cyan crossed. So if I create a new preset, cyan cross, I'm going to record position and color in here, like this. Let's just go green and somewhere else for a minute. So this is what picker filtering is here I've got this cyan cross, but when I apply the cyan cross preset from this filter, I only apply this. So in this case, it will be color. Same thing here. If I apply the cyan X from here, it only applies position. So let's take a look. Cyan X from the position only applies the position. If I undo that and do it from cyan X from color, it only applies the color. What let me just go back. What that setting is in the user preferences is it disables that filtering. So whilst now these filters only show me things that have Gobo preset information stored, if I go back to that position, this is still showing me things that have position stored in them, but when I apply this preset now, the filtering will be ignored, so I'll get all features contained within this. So even though I'm applying it from position, I will get all features on that application. So that's what that means. That is on by default. Use home preset when clearing fixtures. We can do an example of this. Let's just go up in the air. I'll just turn on highlight. So when we clear the programmer, the fixtures are going to return to their home value. And you can see here, I've adjusted the home value in the show file to be at the front edge of my stage, not straight down. So that's what that means. If that option is turned off, use home preset when clearing fixtures, you can see they've now gone back to their fixture default, which is straight down. With that option off, the only way you get the fixtures to return to their home value that you program in the show file is with a direct home command. So now it goes to this value here. So from the individual features, of course, the home button at the top. So that's what that means. Zoom with mouse wheel, I don't think I need to demonstrate this. If it's ticked, it means you can zoom in and out of the fixture chooser when you move the mouse wheel in and out. Same with the command line, I don't feel like I need to demonstrate that. If auto hide is ticked, it means after a period of time without any commands into the command line, it would automatically hide it. It won't automatically pop back up though, you would need to bring that back in by yourself. That's off by default. Show command line in new show, this is on by default. If you start a new show file, do you want to see the command line at the bottom? I would recommend keeping this there because a lot of the sort of Vista free shortcuts and new features rely on that command line being there at the bottom. Audio, do you want to mute tracking back? So mute audio on a tracking backup situation. So if you are running a tracking backup system and you're playing back audio in queues, do you want both consoles or computers to be playing the audio, or do you just want the master? And that's what that is just here. Location, this is to do with date and time events. One of the new features in R2 was that we added a sunrise and sunset trigger in the time. So we could specify sunrise or sunset offset by a number of minutes. So this would be 30 minutes after sunrise, trigger this Cuelist. But of course, for the console to know the sunrise, it has to know where you are in the world. So you can define latitude and longitude, or you can find a location by a number of drop downs to find where you are in the world to give you that location data. So onto the naming tab. Typically, I don't find myself using this too often, but all you need to know pretty much is the Cuelist is, or the number is defined by the hashtag format just here. So in effects templates, for instance, when you create them, it doesn't give a name. That's perhaps a bad example, but if I come into the naming, let's say I always want to name a list Vista something. When you create this, you can see it's gone and numbered them all Vista at the front. They've all got that same label after it. That's pretty much what that means. I don't find myself using this so much, but you can change the convention. Likewise, if you didn't want to see the number of a list at all, you could just delete the hashtag, and you wouldn't see the Cuelist number in any of them. Why you'd want to do that, I have no idea, but that's what these number formats allow you to do, if you wish. Console tab, some settings for your physical consoles, so control surfaces, consoles, all that type of stuff. We've got two settings here: fader action threshold, bottom and top. This is to do with perhaps faders, of course, which are analog. Over time, they can wear, particularly at the top and the bottom. So what this does is it basically changes the software's understanding of where the limit is. So imagine you've got a fader going from 0 to 100%. What those settings change, the bottom one, you might tell the software that, for example, that around 5% physically, only at that point does the console start reading this as 0 up to 100%. So it actually adjusts the physical movement range on the fader, but what it means is you can get some more life out of your faders because you're able to just adjust that and bring it in without having to replace them. So that's what those settings do. You can adjust the bottom sort of limit and the top limit. Encoder sensitivity, this is quite simply how sensitive your encoders are for the features on the consoles itself. You can adjust that for your personal preference. Another setting to go alongside that is something called encoder acceleration. I actually quite like this personally. And what this does is it's going to be hard for me to demonstrate because I don't have a console connected. I recommend trying this on your consoles. It basically means that if you're doing a slow movement on your encoder, it will be a more fine control. And if you do a faster movement, it becomes a more coarse control. It does actually feel quite natural. So I recommend giving that a try if you haven't already done so. Grandmaster locked. Again, pretty straightforward. If the Grandmaster is locked, doesn't matter what level your Grandmaster fader is going to be at, you're not going to be altering that. It basically disables it and it's locked to whatever level you had at the time, in this case, 100%. And you do see that at the top as well. page holdover when active. This is to do with Cuelists that are playing. So let's just take a look at that. Let's just turn this off. So if I play my stage was Cuelist here, it's on a certain page. If I page up or down, the console will show me what's underneath that, so I can see everything that I've got on my different pages. So page holdover is off here. What page holdover does if it's on is if the Cuelist is active, when I'm changing pages, it won't show me what's underneath it until I manually change that. So you can see that I'm changing pages here and it's still showing me what's underneath. It will only show me what's underneath when I manually release that and when it changes to show me what is on that page. If its feature is on, so let's page up to the next page. Page holdover is active. You see the little red triangle here. I can't show this at the minute because I don't have a physical console connected, but if you wanted to temporarily disable this holdover, you can press the up and down arrows together and that would show you what's underneath.
There was a quick question here about the Grandmaster locking. Is it possible to save a scene or save a queue based on the Grandmaster level? So let's say you have a Grandmaster 50%. Can you save that as its queue and it will save those underlying values at 50%?
That's a good question. I'm not sure the answer, so we shall try it. Let's have a look. So the Grandmaster is currently at 43%. So these are obviously now at the same. So if I was to store this somewhere, I'm going to try store all. Now I'm going to put this back up. I would think not, because I actually programmed it at 100%. It's just a scale, but let's see. Yeah, so you're programming it at this even with store all, because I programmed it at 50. The Grandmaster is at a higher level scale, which makes sense.
That was my thought too, but it was good to confirm it.
Yeah, it's the right result. I just wasn't sure of the answer. Inhibit fader jitter. Again, it's just to do with those analog faders. What happens in the consoles is the consoles convert the analog signal to a digital signal so the two can interact. And over time, it can be there's some slight jitter between that if your faders have aged. So this is just like a sort of a buffer or a filter. The console can ignore some slight changes from, like, say, 1% to 2% if it's flickering about. So this is just all about getting more use out of your console as they age. It's completely normal for faders to wear, of course. So that's just what these settings are. Serial and MIDI control. I'm not going to go through these because we talked about these in the dedicated external triggering MIDI webinar. It's on YouTube. Autosave. This is something that we actually changed quite a bit in Vista 3. So the first thing is autosave. And this is a setting that was always there in Vista throughout Vista 2, certainly. And autosave is simply the console is automatically saving a version of it, just like you pressing the save button yourself. It's just keeping that file somewhere else. So should you lose power and everything goes down, you turn it on. If it realizes that there's an autosave version that's newer than the one that you saved manually, then it will prompt you to run that autosaved version. There's only one version of this, so every time it autosaves, it's overwriting itself. Something that was new in Vista 3 is automatically creating show file backups. This is an additional thing to autosave. You can change the duration. The lowest duration is 15 minutes, and you can keep up to 100 backups. So 100 different show file saves every 15 minutes. When it gets to 101, it would replace the oldest show file. The show file backups by default are actually found in your shows folder. So wherever you've installed the user data, typically it's documents by default. You can see shows and backups folder here. You can see all the backups of whatever we've been doing down here on this stuff. The cool thing is you could actually change the location for that. It could be an external USB device or a USB hard drive. So if you've got that plugged into your console or computer, you could be pretty safe in the knowledge that you're saving the backups to that external location. You're still pressing save and saving it to the Vista data normal shows location. So that's pretty good. Of course, we have to stress that still don't use this as an excuse not to press save manually at your regular intervals. We can't stress that enough. But the tools are there that you should never lose any show file data when storing stuff. Any questions there, Ben?
No, not pertaining to what you're doing right now.
Just realized the time. I can't believe it's taken a whole hour to go through this.
Yes.
So we're just into the last couple of settings. Play reasserts the entire cue list. Let me see how I can demonstrate that for a second. So in this example here, I'm trying to. I haven't got an example that I can demonstrate this with, but essentially, what that means is if you're playing a cue list and you're going from one list to the other on an LTP basis, with this option on, when you play a cue, it will assert the tracked information as well. So if you've got intensity and position coming from Q1, but you're playing Q10 that only has color in it, do you want the position to also change back to what it should have been in that list? And that's what that setting is. Without that, you will only be asserting the events that are within the queue that you're playing. 9 times out of 10, you want that to be on. Reassert uses lifetime. Pretty self-explanatory. If you're using the assert action, do you want that to use the queue time, or do you want that to use the time that's on the lifetime fader? So that's just an option that you can use that. Spacebar acts as play on open Cuelist or select a Cuelist. This simply means the keyboard shortcut. So if I'm editing a certain list, when I press the spacebar, do I want that to be playing the cues? We have play for forward, we have shift spacebar for release, and we have and that's the only commands we have in this version. There are more coming in the next version, which is why I hesitated. But yeah, that's what that does. Home stop effects. When you press the home function, do you want to also stop the effect, or do you want the effect to run around the home base point? That's what that means. DMX updates per second. This is the frame rate of DMX. Some Vista hardware supports it, some doesn't, depending on the chips that are in there. So you can change that up or down. 44 is the maximum, of course, and you can decrease it down from there. Networking, picking up the pace a little bit because we're short on time. This is to do the node name and the group name are to do with tracking backups. So the node name is the computer name. So this is Jack's Windows machine. And the group name would be if you're connecting multiple Vista devices, they all have to be in the same group. So this could be the show name or whatever you need. The network interface, this is telling Vista where you want your lighting data to go to. So ArtNet, streaming ACN, Pathport, that type of stuff. To choose your network interface card, you just hit choose and select one from the available. So you can see here, I'm using my Ethernet loopback. I don't want to be sending out ArtNet over my Wi-Fi connection, for example. Tracking backup timeout. Timeout is the heartbeat from when it loses the master. So it would wait 3 seconds before it pops up a message that it's lost that heartbeat. So do you want to fail over? Auto failover, this would be the countdown. So once it pops up a message saying that it can't see the heartbeat anymore, after 20 seconds, it would automatically fail over to the slave device. So you can change that timing. Broadcast address, this is simply to do with Ethernet. I'm not going to go into this too much. Do you want to follow the subnet directed of your IP address? In this case, it's 169.168. Or do you want to follow the ArtNet primary and secondary broadcast addresses, which are either in the 2 dot or 10 dot range? Lastly, we've got the editing tab to do with what you want the default to be when you're pressing the store key. And this store key relates to pretty much the store part function. What do you want these settings to be as a default? Of course, this option is also what we use when we use the command line store. It's the same thing, just there. Oops, last one. Yeah, so you can change that. Q deletion mode, do you want it to be normal or do you want it to be Q only? So what do you want to be ticked by default when you're clicking the -Q delete? Do you always want that to be Q only or not? Lastly, extract application mode. Do you want it to always ask you what you want to do? That's what prompt means. It will always ask you if you want to insert new queues or do you want to merge the first part of the extract into the current queue that you're in. We did talk about that in the extract video all the way back when we started these webinars, I believe. That pretty much sums it up. Any questions, Ben?
Nope, I don't think so.
So hopefully that was useful information to some of you, if not all.
Very useful.
Cool.
This one went a little longer than normal, so
Yeah, surprisingly.
but there's a lot to it. So this is probably the stuff that people don't see as much. So yeah, no other questions. I think that would take care of it then.
Great. Thanks, guys. See you next time.